My name is Alina Vance, and I'm 28 years old, living right here in Portland, Oregon. Most days, I consider myself pretty lucky. I get to spend my time surrounded by the thing I love most in the world: sound. Specifically, making sound perfect in people's homes. I work as an audio and home theater installer for a company called Apex Audio Solutions. It's not just a job, it's my passion. You see, I believe that great sound can transform a space, turn a simple movie night into an immersive experience, or make a backyard barbecue feel like a concert. When a customer walks into their newly installed home theater, eyes wide, and the first notes of music fill the room with crystal clarity, that's when I know I've done my job right. It's a highly technical field, requiring a keen understanding of acoustics, electrical wiring, and the latest in audiovisual technology. But it's also an art. Deciding where to place a speaker so the sound bounces just right, figuring out the perfect angle for a television, or meticulously routing cables so they disappear into the walls like magic. That's where the art comes in. I pride myself on my attention to detail, my ability to troubleshoot anything, and my commitment to delivering a flawless system every single time. My distinctive quality, if I had to pick one, is my unwavering patience. You need it in this line of work. Walls can be tricky, wiring can be stubborn, and sometimes customers can be, well, challenging. But I always remind myself that at the end of the day, I'm creating something special for them, something that will bring joy. My boss, Steve, is the best. He's a gruff man with a heart of gold, a true craftsman himself, and he trusts me implicitly. He built Apex Audio Solutions on a foundation of quality and integrity, and he instilled those values in every one of us. If I made a mistake, as long as I owned up to it, he'd have my back. If a job was particularly complex, say, due to a thick concrete wall or an unusually long cable run, he'd be upfront with the client about the increased time and cost. And if a customer was being unreasonable, Steve wasn't afraid to politely but firmly put his foot down. He always said, "We don't just sell equipment, we sell peace of mind and an incredible audio experience, and that comes at a fair price for fair work." Our quoting process was straightforward. As the lead installer, I had a significant say in the final cost, factoring in everything from the number of rooms, the specific type of cabling required, the mounting hardware, and the estimated labor hours. Once the quote was agreed upon, the customer would pay half up front, and the remaining half was due upon completion and a thorough system test. A signed form confirming the system was fully functional and to their satisfaction was our standard procedure. It was a system that worked well, ensuring both our company and our clients were protected. My life outside of work in Portland often involved exploring the local music scene, catching a live show at one of the many independent venues, or hiking one of the beautiful trails in Forest Park. I loved the blend of nature and urban culture that Portland offered, and it grounded me, helping me stay patient and focused in my demanding job. I truly felt I had found my place, doing work I loved, surrounded by people I respected, and living in a city that felt like home. Life felt balanced and fulfilling, a perfectly tuned sound system in itself. That sense of balance, however, was about to be severely tested. The first crack in my perfectly tuned world appeared in the form of a man named Reginald Thorne. He lived in one of those sprawling, modern mansions nestled in the hills overlooking the city, all sharp angles, glass, and what appeared to be an abundance of reinforced concrete and natural stone. The kind of house that makes an audio installer sigh, knowing the challenges that await. Reginald, who I quickly started referring to as Reggie in my head, wanted a whole house audio setup, multiple indoor zones, a dedicated home theater, and extensive outdoor speakers for his patio and garden areas. He wanted it all, and he wanted it cheap. When Steve and I first met him, Reggie's arrogance was palpable. He talked down to us, assuming we were merely glorified handymen rather than skilled technicians. He waved his hand dismissively when we tried to explain the complexities of his particular house. "It's just speakers, isn't it? Plug and play," he'd scoff. We patiently explained that his concrete and stone walls would require specialized drilling and cabling techniques, increasing both the time and cost involved. We gave him a detailed quote, higher than what he seemed to expect for such an extensive, custom job. Reggie was furious. He launched into a tirade about how we were overcharging, trying to take advantage of him, and that he could get it done for half the price by some guy with a van. We stood our ground, explaining our rates were standard for the quality and complexity of the work. Steve, true to form, politely but firmly told him that if he wanted the Apex Audio Solutions standard of excellence, this was the price. If he wanted to go with the guy with a van, he was welcome to. Reggie, predictably, was not happy, and we left his imposing house feeling quite certain we wouldn't hear from him again. It was a relief, honestly. Some clients just aren't worth the headache, no matter the size of the job. I wasn't particularly unsatisfied with anything in my life before Reggie Thorne, but his appearance certainly created a problem I hadn't anticipated. The problem wasn't just about money. It was about professional respect, about the integrity of my work, and about maintaining the high standards Steve and I had always upheld. Little did I know, this initial unpleasant encounter was just the opening act for a much larger, more infuriating drama. My world was about to be thoroughly shaken, and Reggie Thorne was definitely the unwelcome orchestrator of the impending discord. The very next Wednesday, just 2 days after our initial, less-than-pleasant meeting with Reggie, my work phone rang. It was him, and his tone was drastically different. Gone was the arrogant swagger, replaced by a strained, almost frantic urgency. "Eleanor," he practically shrieked into the phone, "I need those speakers installed now. I completely forgot I'm hosting a huge party this Saturday and I need music everywhere." I blinked, trying to process his sudden about-face. A party on Saturday. Today was Wednesday. That gave us less than 3 full days to complete a massive, complex installation that we had originally quoted for at least a week's worth of work. My first thought was an immediate, resounding no. This was exactly the kind of rushed, impossible job Steve warned us about. But then a thought flickered. Reggie was in a bind. A big bind. I put him on hold and called Steve. I quickly explained the situation, the sudden urgency, the ridiculous timeline. Steve listened patiently, then chuckled. "He's desperate, huh? All right, Eleanor. This changes things. We can do it, but it's going to require pulling in a couple more guys, working overtime, and it's going to cost him significantly more. The complexity hasn't changed, only the speed and speed costs." He quoted me a new, much higher figure. When I relayed the updated quote to Reggie, I expected another argument, another outburst. Instead, there was a moment of silence, then a resigned sigh. "Fine, whatever it takes. Just get it done. I'll pay the 50% deposit right now." My eyes widened. He actually agreed. The new quote was around $9,000, almost double the original $5,000, simply because of the impossible timeline and the need for extra manpower. Reggie's $5,000 deposit hit our account within the hour. It felt like walking into a trap, but the lure of such a substantial, expedited payment was too strong to resist for the company. Steve greenlit the project, and we scheduled to start first thing Thursday morning. I tried to push away the uneasy feeling that gnawed at me. Reggie Thorne had already proven himself to be difficult, demanding, and disrespectful. This sudden urgency, while financially beneficial, felt like a ticking time bomb. I knew deep down that despite the increased payment, this job was going to be a nightmare. But a job was a job, and Steve had given his approval. I spent the rest of Wednesday mentally preparing, reviewing the floor plans of Reggie's monstrous house, visualizing cable runs through concrete, anticipating every possible obstacle. My patience, I reminded myself, would be my greatest asset. I would need every ounce of it. Little did I know, even my boundless patience would be pushed to its absolute breaking point. Act 2. They try to solve the problem but fail, making it worse. Thursday morning arrived, bright and early, but the optimism usually accompanying a new project was noticeably absent. I arrived at Reggie Thorne's house with a small team, 2 of our best technicians, Liam and Chloe, both seasoned and efficient. We had a clear plan, a tight schedule, and a mountain of equipment. From the moment we stepped through the door, the project devolved into a chaotic mess. It wasn't merely difficult due to the house's construction, which was challenging enough with its thick concrete load-bearing walls and decorative stone facades that hid crucial electrical conduits. No, the primary obstacle was Reggie himself. He seemed determined to be present for every single decision, to scrutinize every single action, and to question every single choice we made. "Why are you drilling there? The sound will be better over here." He'd bellow, pointing to a spot that defied all acoustic logic. We would patiently explain the principles of sound dispersion, the optimal speaker placement for even coverage, the need to avoid structural elements. He'd scoff, roll his eyes, and then invariably say, "Well, I want it here. I'm the customer, aren't I?" We'd try to compromise, to find a solution that satisfied his irrational demands while still maintaining the system's integrity. But every compromise felt like a concession, a chipping away at our professional standards. We started in the main living area, a vast, open space with high ceilings. Our plan was to recess ceiling speakers for a clean look, but Reggie insisted on large, surface-mounted speakers, claiming he wanted to see the technology. When we began measuring for the wall mounts, he'd interrupt. No, higher. I want them almost touching the ceiling." We'd explain that placing speakers too high could lead to sound distortion and uneven distribution, but he was adamant. "I know what I want. Don't tell me how to do my own house." This wasn't just micromanagement, it was outright obstruction. He wasn't just questioning our methods, he was questioning our competence, our intelligence, and even our worth. "You young people always think you know everything. Back in my day, we built things to last, none of this fancy tech nonsense," he grumbled, watching Liam carefully thread a cable through a conduit. Liam, usually unflappable, shot me a glance that screamed exasperation. Every speaker placement, every wire run, every drill hole became a battleground. If we used a long drill bit to get through a particularly thick section of concrete, he'd hover, asking, "Is that really necessary? You're making such a mess." When we meticulously cleaned up every speck of dust, he'd complain about the noise. His house was enormous, a labyrinth of rooms, and each one seemed to present its own unique set of challenges, exacerbated by his constant interference. The concrete walls were indeed a nightmare. Our industrial-grade rotary hammers whined and groaned, slowly chewing through the dense material, but each hole took significantly longer than anticipated. Dust, despite our best efforts with vacuums and drop cloths, seemed to get everywhere, coating surfaces in a fine gray film. Reggie would storm in, coughing dramatically. "You're ruining my house. Look at this dust. I just had this place professionally cleaned." We de-apologize, reassure him we'd clean everything thoroughly at the end, but his complaints continued unabated. His insults grew more pointed, more personal. He watched me as I worked on a complex wiring panel, meticulously connecting dozens of individual wires, each color-coded and labeled. "You know, Alina, you're far too slow for this kind of work. And you're just a girl. This is a man's job. My nephew, he's an engineer. He could do this in half the time." My jaw tightened. I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. I'd faced sexism in this industry before, but never so overtly, so relentlessly from a client. "Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "this isn't about speed, it's about precision. And I assure you my gender has absolutely no bearing on my ability to do my job, which I am doing to the highest possible standard." He merely sneered. "High standards? You haven't even finished 2 rooms in 6 hours. You're a crap installer, uneducated and poor. You'll never be a successful businessman like me because you have no drive." His words stung, striking at my pride, at everything I had worked so hard to achieve. I felt a surge of hot anger, a desire to pack up our tools and walk out right then and there. But I held my tongue, remembering Steve's unwavering faith in me and the substantial deposit we had already received. We had to finish this. But the truth was undeniable. After 6 grueling hours, we had only managed to get 2 out of the planned 6 indoor rooms properly wired and mounted. The patio and outside areas hadn't even been touched. We were hopelessly behind schedule. The party was in 2 days. I pulled Reggie aside, away from Liam and Chloe, trying to maintain a professional demeanor despite my simmering rage. "Mr. Thorne," I began, "at this rate, we are not going to be done in time for your party on Saturday. Your constant interference, the difficulty of your house's construction, and the sheer volume of work you requested in such a short period, it's just not feasible. We've barely completed 2 rooms. He threw his hands up in exasperation. "This is your fault, Alina. You're incompetent. I hired you to do a job and you're failing. You're a terrible project manager. No wonder you're just an installer and not running your own company. You have no business sense, no foresight. You're just like all the others, making promises you can't keep. This is why I always have to micromanage people. They just can't do anything right on their own." His words were a constant barrage, chipping away at my confidence, attempting to undermine my self-worth. I stood there, taking it, feeling the bile rise in my throat. I couldn't articulate how frustrating it was to be blamed for delays entirely caused by his own irrational demands and constant interruptions. He seemed to genuinely believe that his presence and criticisms were helping, when in reality, they were the primary reason for our lack of progress. The stress was immense. My shoulders ached from the heavy tools, my hands were raw from drilling, and my head pounded from the constant back and forth with Reggie. Liam and Chloe, too, were visibly exhausted and demoralized. We left that evening feeling defeated, having spent a day battling not just a challenging house, but an even more challenging client. I called Steve, giving him an honest, unfiltered account of the day's disaster. He listened, grunting in frustration occasionally. "I knew this guy was going to be trouble, Alina. Just hang in there. Try to get as much done as you can. We'll figure something out." His words were encouraging, but the sheer weight of the task felt crushing. I lay awake that night, replaying Reggie's insults, the unfairness of it all. My usual peaceful sleep was replaced by tossing and turning, my mind racing with permutations of cable runs and speaker placements, all of them ending in Reggie's sneering face. Friday morning, we arrived back at Reggie's house, dreading what the day would bring. Surprisingly, Reggie seemed to have had a moment of clarity, or perhaps panic had finally set in as Saturday loomed closer. "All right, Alina," he said, still gruff but without the previous day's venom. "I've thought about it. We can cut down the rooms. Just focus on the main living area, the home theater, and 2 other rooms, plus the patio and outside areas. 4 indoor zones and the outdoor. Can you do that by tonight?" It was still a monumental push, but doable. We had made some progress the day before, so 4 indoor zones and the patio area seemed achievable if we worked non-stop and without further interruptions. "Yes, Mr. Thorne," I said, trying to keep the relief from my voice. "We can make that work, but we need to focus, and we can't afford any more interruptions." He grumbled, but didn't argue. For a few blessed hours, Reggie kept his distance, allowing us to work with a semblance of efficiency. We plunged into the home theater, a dedicated space where sound precision was paramount. The walls were already pre-wired, thankfully, making the installation of the in-wall speakers relatively straightforward. But then, as we moved to the outdoor patio, the real challenge presented itself. His patio area was a vast expanse of polished stone and intricately laid pavers, surrounded by dense landscaping. He wanted speakers integrated into the stone itself, disguised to be almost invisible. Drilling through that thick, beautiful stone was excruciating. It was slow, painstaking work, requiring specialized diamond-tipped core bits and a constant stream of water to prevent overheating and cracking. Each hole took an eternity, and the dust, despite our water management, was thick and clingy. As the day wore on, Reggie's patience, thin to begin with, began to fray again. He started hovering, criticizing the drilling's speed, commenting on the amount of water we were using. "Are you sure you know what you're doing? You're going to damage my expensive stone," he'd accuse. We explained the necessity of water for the diamond bits, the precision required to avoid cracking the stone. He'd just shake his head, muttering about our incompetence. By late afternoon, we were physically and mentally drained. But miraculously, we had done it. Every speaker was mounted, every wire connected, every amplifier powered up. We went through the entire system, zone by zone, testing each speaker, ensuring the sound was perfect, balanced, and clear. From the deep bass of the subwoofers in the home theater to the crisp highs of the outdoor patio speakers, everything worked flawlessly. Reggie, for once, seemed genuinely impressed. He walked through each zone, his initial complaints replaced by a grudging nod of approval. He even cracked a small, almost human smile. "All right, Alina, it sounds good. Better than I expected, actually." It was the closest thing to a compliment I had heard from him. We gathered our tools, leaving the house as clean as we could manage, all the dust meticulously vacuumed, the equipment neatly packed away. That evening, as Liam, Chloe, and I shared a well-earned beer at a quiet pub, a sense of relief washed over me. We had done it. Against all odds, despite Reggie's best efforts to sabotage his own project, we had delivered. The job was finished, the system working perfectly. All that remained was the final payment. I actually allowed myself to believe that the worst was over, that Reggie Thorne, having seen the quality of our work, would grudgingly pay us what was due. The thought of my revenge, of the satisfying poetic justice that was soon to come, was not yet even a whisper in my mind. I was just tired and relieved. Then came Saturday morning. My phone rang just after 7, an ungodly hour for a weekend, especially after a week like that. It was Reggie Thorne, and his voice was a furious roar that practically vibrated the phone in my hand. "Alina, this system is a disaster. It's broken. Nothing is working. You didn't complete the job properly, you're incompetent, and I'm certainly not going to pay you the updated quote price for this shoddy work. My blood ran cold. Broken. Nothing working. That was impossible. We had tested everything meticulously just hours before, and it was perfect. He continued his tirade, his voice laced with venom. This is a joke. My party is tonight and I have no music. You people are charlatans. I demand you come over right now and fix this. You owe me a working system and you'll get no more money from me. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. The audacity, the sheer gall of the man. After all we had endured, all the insults, all the extra effort, for him to claim the system was broken and refuse payment. It was an insult to my professionalism, to my integrity, to every ounce of effort my team and I had poured into that nightmare installation. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, about justice. I saw red. A wave of pure, unadulterated fury washed over me, hot and blinding. I ended the call without a word, my finger trembling as I immediately dialed Steve. I recounted Reggie's furious call, his absurd claims, his outright refusal to pay the remaining $5,000, let alone the extra $4,000 for the expedited work. Steve listened in silence, and I could practically hear his own anger building on the other end of the line. When I finished, he let out a low, dangerous growl. That slimy piece of work. After all you guys did, going above and beyond. This is unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. You know what, Alina? You have my full go-ahead, go over there. Do whatever you need to do, just make sure he pays us. And make sure he regrets trying to pull this stunt. His words, usually calm and measured, were sharp with righteous indignation. Steve's explicit permission was all I needed. The fury, though still present, began to morph into something colder, more calculating. The perfect revenge began to form in my mind, a silent, almost invisible act of retribution that would hit Reggie Thorne where it hurt the most, his ego and his wallet. This was my low point, feeling completely violated professionally. But it was also the turning point, the moment I decided I wouldn't just fix the problem, I would turn it into a profound lesson for Reggie Thorne. I was no longer just an installer, I was an instrument of poetic justice. Act 3. They make a final attempt to solve the problem, which may succeed or fail. The consequence is not always as expected. I hung up the phone with Steve, the receiver still warm against my ear. My fury, though still simmering, had cooled into a hard, crystalline resolve. Reggie Thorne had pushed me too far, insulting my work, my team, and my very competence. He had tried to steal from us, plain and simple, trying to leverage a false complaint to get thousands of dollars of our hard work for free. But I was Alina Vance, and I didn't let anyone walk all over me, especially not a pompous, manipulative client like Reginald Thorne. I took a deep, steadying breath, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. My plan was forming, clear and precise, like the perfect sound wave. It wasn't about yelling or confrontation. It was about precision, about making him believe he was in control, only to pull the rug out from under him at the crucial moment. This was going to be a masterpiece of silent, subtle sabotage. I drove back to Reggie's house, the short journey feeling impossibly long. When I arrived, the large glass doors swung open, and there he was standing in his grand foyer, arms crossed, a smug, self-satisfied look on his face that just screamed, "I'm about to get away with something." He clearly thought he had me cornered, that I was there to grovel and fix his broken system for free. "So you finally decided to show up, Alina," he sneered, his voice dripping with false contempt. "It's about time. My party starts in a few hours, and I still have no music thanks to your shoddy work." I ignored his taunt, walking past him with a calm, businesslike demeanor. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne. I'm here to diagnose the issue and get your system back online. Where would you like me to start?" He pointed vaguely towards the main living area. "Just fix everything. I need my party to be perfect." I nodded, internally relishing the irony of his words. Perfect, indeed. I started with the home theater, methodically checking connections, pressing buttons on the remote, just as I would during any legitimate troubleshooting session. The amplifier hummed, the indicators glowed green, everything appeared to be in working order from the outside. I then moved to the main living area, pressing play on the streaming service. Nothing. No sound. Reggie watched me like a hawk, a triumphant glint in his eye. "See, nothing. It's completely dead, just as I told you." I moved deliberately, pulling out my small toolkit, pretending to check voltage, continuity, everything an installer would do. I spent a good 20 minutes in the home theater and another 10 in the living room, meticulously checking every component, every input, every setting. Of course, everything appeared to be connected and functioning perfectly, because it was. He thought I was genuinely troubleshooting a complex problem. He hovered, occasionally grumbling. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" "This shouldn't take so long." I just smiled faintly, turning a knob here, pressing a button there. Finally, I turned to him. "Mr. Thorne, everything appears to be in order from the system's perspective. No error codes, all components are receiving power." He scoffed. "Then why isn't there any sound? It's broken, Alina, admit it." "Well," I said, looking him directly in the eye, my voice even and calm, "let's try one more thing. Perhaps it was just a temporary glitch." I pressed the play button on the remote again, and of course, no sound emanated from the perfectly installed speakers. I hummed, feigning confusion. "Tell you what, why don't we go through each zone, one by one, and test them all thoroughly? Just to be sure. I'll make sure everything is absolutely perfect for your party. Then, once you've signed off that you're completely satisfied, we can discuss the final payment." Reggie seemed to ponder this, his eyes narrowing slightly. He clearly wanted a working system, and he wanted it without paying. My offer of a full retest, implying a complete restoration of service, seemed to reassure him. He nodded. "Fine, but I'm watching you, and if it's still not working, I'm not paying you a dime more." "Understood," I said, a dangerous calm settling over me. We spent the next hour walking through each of the 4 indoor zones and the outdoor patio area. In each room, I went through the motions of checking the system. I would play a track, confirm there was no sound, then feign a moment of concentration, as if contemplating a deeply complex problem. Reggie, surprisingly, seemed to relax slightly. He was clearly convinced the system was genuinely broken, and he believed I was genuinely trying to fix it. His arrogance was his downfall. He completely overlooked the fact that I wasn't opening up walls or pulling out large sections of wiring. My movements were subtle, precise, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. When we reached the main equipment rack, tucked away neatly in a utility closet, I paused. This was where the real magic, or rather, the real unmagic, would happen. This rack housed the amplifiers, the central nervous system of his entire audio system. I opened the rack door, revealing the neatly organized spaghetti of wires, audio inputs, speaker outputs, network cables. "All right, Mr. Thorne," I said, turning to him. "This is where all the processing happens. I'm just going to run a final diagnostic here, make sure everything's talking to each other. It's a bit technical, so you might not understand what I'm doing, but rest assured, I'm making sure every connection is solid." He waved his hand dismissively. "Just do whatever you have to do. I'm busy." He turned his back for a moment, distracted by a text message on his phone, and that was my window. I worked quickly, my hands moving with practiced efficiency. The speaker wires, thick and clearly labeled, were connected to the output terminals of each amplifier. I didn't cut them. That would be too messy, too obvious, and would require genuine repair. Instead, I carefully, almost lovingly, unscrewed the binding posts on each amplifier, pulling out the speaker wire for each zone. One by one, quietly, subtly, I disconnected every single speaker wire from every single amplifier. Then, I moved to the input side. His music source, a high-end streaming device, was connected to the amplifier via an optical cable. With a small, satisfying click, I unlatched and removed that cable too. The beauty of it was that the wires remained intact, neatly coiled and still appearing to be connected if you weren't looking closely. The external appearance of the system remained perfect. It was only the internal connectivity that was gone. He thought I was doing some fancy testing, some advanced diagnostic work. He had no idea I was systematically rendering his entire, expensive, perfectly working audio system completely and utterly silent. He was watching me from a distance, occasionally glancing at his phone, completely oblivious. When I was finished, I closed the equipment rack door, securing it neatly. "All right, Mr. Thorne," I said, turning to him, a faint, unreadable smile on my face. "Everything has been checked. The system is definitely working." He stared at me, a mixture of skepticism and hope on his face. "It is, so it's fixed." "It is," I confirmed. "Why don't you try it now? Go ahead, play some music." He walked over to the control panel, pressed a button, and a moment later, sound filled the main living area. Crisp, clear, powerful music. He looked startled, then genuinely pleased. He walked to the home theater, played something, and rich, enveloping sound filled the room. He went from zone to zone, testing everything. Each time, perfect sound. He grinned, a wide, genuine smile as if he had just won the lottery. He then produced the completion form, signed it with a flourish, his previous complaints seemingly forgotten in his delight at the working system. "See," he crowed, beaming. "It just needed a little adjustment, so it works. Good. Now about that payment, I'm still not going to pay you the full amount. This is how you get things for free, Alina, by complaining and holding your ground. You learn that in business." The words hung in the air, a final, arrogant jab. His smug expression was unbearable. This was the moment. He had signed the form, confirming the system was working. He had just admitted his intent to defraud us. I took a deep breath, maintaining eye contact. "Yes, Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice sweet as honey. "That's one way to look at it." And then, with the same subtle, practiced efficiency, while he was distracted by his phone, already starting to send texts about his party, I went back to the utility closet. I opened the equipment rack again. My hands moved quickly, reversing the process. I gently, precisely disconnected every single speaker wire from the amplifiers again. I unplugged the optical cable, rendering the central nervous system of his audio system completely inert. He didn't notice a thing. He was too busy gloating, too wrapped up in his perceived victory. I closed the rack door, gathered my tools, and walked out. "Have a good party, Mr. Thorne," I called out cheerfully as I left his house. He barely grunted a response, already absorbed in his phone. As soon as I was in my car, out of his sight, I turned off my work phone. The silence in my car was deafening, but it was the most satisfying silence I had ever experienced. I drove away, leaving Reggie Thorne to his perfectly installed, perfectly wired, and utterly silent mansion. Monday morning, Steve called me, a grin audible in his voice. "Alina, you brilliant, brilliant woman. Reggie Thorne called this morning, absolutely livid. Said his party was ruined, that nothing worked, that we defrauded him." I couldn't help but smile. And what did you tell him, Steve? I told him very politely that we had a signed completion form, signed by him, confirming the system was fully functional on Saturday morning, and that any subsequent issues would be treated as a new service call, requiring a diagnostic fee plus a repair fee in addition to his outstanding balance. I explained that we stood by our work, and the form proved it was working when we left. Steve paused for dramatic effect. He argued, he screamed, he threatened lawsuits, but I held firm. He even tried to claim you did something to the system when you were there on Saturday, but I said that was absurd. You were merely testing it, and he signed off on it working. In the end, a leaner, he agreed. He paid us the remaining $5,000 plus an extra $5,000 for the diagnosis and repair. $10,000 in total. My jaw dropped. $10,000 for simply plugging wires back in. This was beyond poetic justice. It was an outright windfall. He agreed to $5,000 extra, I repeated, barely believing it. He did. He was desperate. He had a party full of important people, his ego was bruised, and he couldn't stand the idea of his elaborate system not working. Plus, he knew he couldn't get anyone else to come out so fast after pulling a stunt like that. He's stuck. Steve chuckled. So, a leaner, you get to go back to his house, be polite, be professional, plug everything back in, and collect our money. I drove back to Reggie's mansion that afternoon, a spring in my step. This time, there was no smugness, no arrogance. When Reggie opened the door, he looked utterly defeated, his face pale and drawn. "A leaner," he mumbled, his voice surprisingly subdued. "Thank goodness you're here. I don't know what happened, but nothing worked for the party. It was a disaster." He actually sounded apologetic, almost polite. It was a bizarre transformation, a testament to the power of a ruined party and a hefty bill. "Of course, Mr. Thorne," I replied, maintaining a perfectly professional demeanor, a small, secret smile playing on my lips. "Let's get this sorted for you." I walked straight to the utility closet, opened the equipment rack, and this time I didn't pretend. My movements were efficient, direct. I reconnected every single speaker wire to its correct binding post, securing each one firmly. I plugged the optical input cable back into the amplifier. It took me less than 5 minutes. I closed the rack door, turned to Reggie, and said, "All right, Mr. Thorne. Everything should be working perfectly now." He looked skeptical but went to the nearest control panel. He pressed play, and the room was instantly filled with rich, clear sound. He walked to the next room, then the next, his face slowly transforming from skepticism to relief, then to a quiet astonishment. He finally turned to me, a bewildered expression on his face. "That's it. That's all you did. It just works now." "Yes, Mr. Thorne," I said, meeting his gaze evenly. "Sometimes with complex systems, the connections can just loosen over time. It happens, but it's all secure now." It was a lie, of course, but a necessary one, protecting my secret and our company's reputation. He nodded slowly, still somewhat dazed. He walked over to a table, picked up a checkbook, and without a word wrote out the check for $10,000. He handed it to me. "Thank you, Aliner," he said, his voice surprisingly sincere. "Thank you for fixing it." I took the check, a wave of profound satisfaction washing over me. This wasn't just about the money, it was about the justice, about making a bully understand the consequences of his actions. I had held my ground, and I had won. As I walked out of Reggie Thorne's mansion, the heavy check in my hand felt lighter than air. This was one of the most satisfying acts of revenge I had ever orchestrated. The consequences were indeed poetic. Reggie, who tried to get something for free by complaining and manipulating, ended up paying double. He thought he was smart, but he was outsmarted by his own arrogance and my patience. When I returned to the office, Steve was beaming. Great work, Aliner. That's how you handle a bad apple. He then looked at me seriously. You know, this whole fiasco has given me an idea. From now on, if we ever encounter a client like Reggie Thorne again, a known troublemaker who tries to withhold payment after signing off, we're not just going to send collection agencies. We're going to implement an Aliner Vance protocol. If they try to stiff us after completion, we'll cut the cables. Not just disconnect, but actually cut them. And then, we ignore the customer unless they agree to pay the original balance plus an exorbitant repair fee. No more second chances, no more haggling. Your actions saved us thousands and taught that man a lesson he won't soon forget. My method had become company policy, a permanent deterrent against future reges. It was a strange legacy, but a satisfying one. My new normal felt lighter, more confident. My experience with Reggie Thorne had reinforced my belief in fair work for fair pay, and it had hardened my resolve. I was no longer just a skilled installer. I was a protector of our company's integrity. Reggie Thorne did try to retaliate. About a month later, we started seeing a flurry of negative reviews pop up online, under various fake names, all suspiciously similar in their complaints about shoddy work and overcharging. Steve, however, had foreseen this. Our company had a strict policy. Only verified customers who had paid their invoices in full could leave reviews on our official platforms. Any unverified reviews were flagged and removed. Furthermore, Steve had already sent a detailed, factual account of the Reggie Thorne incident to our legal team, ensuring we had all our ducks in a row. When Reggie's increasingly desperate online rants failed to gain traction, he tried to contact local news outlets, but his story fell apart under scrutiny when faced with our signed completion form and the fact that he eventually paid double. In fact, the whole incident, especially the story of us collecting double payment from a difficult client, subtly boosted our reputation among other high-end clients who valued companies that stood firm on their quality and got results. Reggie Thorne faded into obscurity, a silent disco in his own mind, left only with the memory of a ruined party and a vastly inflated bill. And as for me, Aliner Vance, I continued to bring perfect sound to Portland, one satisfied and occasionally very humbled, client at a time.